A little over a year ago, I made a video taking a look at every Premier League team's worst signing over the last 7 years. And I won't lie to you, I was spoilt for choice with most clubs. Put bluntly, there were some real stinkers in there. I seem to recall that it did quite well, but for some unknown reason, as it was recently pointed out to me, I never made the opposite. That is to say, every team's best signing over that same period of time. Which is odd, because I generally prefer making positive videos rather than negative ones, what with me being such a fun-loving kind of guy. So today I am righting that wrong, delving into the transfer dealings of each of the 20 Premier League teams from the summer 2014 transfer window onwards, which is, technically speaking, a little over 7 years. But I hope you'll forgive me for that, and picking out who I think has been the best signing of the lot, with some honourable mentions thrown in there for good measure. As ever with these types of videos, the best signing does not necessarily mean the best player. Taken into account is the player's transfer fee, their impact, level of performance, and either their potential or indeed their realised sell-on value, as well as their ability, of course. Hopefully that all makes sense, and if not, I'm sure it will once we get going. Here is every Premier League team's best signing, in my opinion, over the last 7 years. Arsenal. Alexis Sanchez. The only possible doubt that could surround Alexis Sanchez's claim to have been Arsenal's best signing since the summer of 2014 is the manner in which he departed. Having joined the Gunners in July 2014 for just shy of £32 million, Sanchez left Arsenal in a swap deal involving Henrik Mkhitaryan in January 2018, and the Armenian proved to be a bit of a dud at the Emirates. That is a slightly external issue to Sanchez's signing itself though, and by every other possible metric, he is by far the best player that Arsenal have signed since the 2014 World Cup. Sanchez's success at the Emirates ought to have come as little surprise, given how well he performed at Barcelona, but he definitely reached yet new heights in North London, and over the course of his 3 full seasons at the club, he was arguably the best player in the Premier League and almost permanently among the top 4 or 5. I would give honourable mentions to Kieran Tierney and Gabriel Martinelli, the latter of whom cost just £6 million and looked really promising before he got that injury, along with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. I suppose, though, he did cost a small fortune. Aston Villa. JOLEON LESCOTT. I'm just messing with you. What a joker I am. Aston Villa. John McGinn. If there is one perk of having a medium-sized football YouTube channel, it is surely the fact that it gives me the opportunity to boast about the handful of occasions in which I get things right, and to keep stum and not read any comments about the mountain of stupid things that I've said over the years. John McGinn was one of my rare right calls, as I thought it was crazy that there wasn't a whole queue of clubs clamouring to sign him from Hibernian in the summer of 2018. And I thought it was even crazier that Villa were able to beat Celtic to the punch with a bid worth less than £3 million. McGinn played a key role in Villa's promotion from the Championship during his debut campaign at Villa Park, winning the club's Player of the Year award, and he has looked right at home from the word go in the Premier League. If Villa wished to sell McGinn now, they could do so for at least 10 times what they paid for him, and most likely a good bit more. So he takes this one, ahead of the likes of Emi Martinez and Ezri Konsa, who were also excellent signings. Brentford. Said Benrahma. Whilst one team comes close, I would say, without any shadow of a doubt, that Brentford had more candidates for their inclusion in this video than any other team. Since the arrival of Matthew Benham in 2009, back when Brentford were competing on a shoestring budget in League One, the Bees have had the best recruitment in all of English football. At least as far as I'm concerned. There are so many players that I could list, whether that be Ollie Watkins, Neil Maupay, Ezri Konsa, Andre Gray, Ethan Pinnock, Moses Odubajo, Ivan Toney, Scott Hogan, the list just goes on and on. Almost half of them could take top spot, but I've given it to Benrahma, a real gem plucked out of nowhere who perfectly sums up the genius, or at least genius compared to most clubs, of Brentford's transfer strategy. When I say nowhere, I mean Ligue 2, where Benrahma was impressing before joining Brentford for less than £3 million. He spent 2 seasons tearing the Championship to shreds before being sold to West Ham for a potential £30 million, a 10x return on their investment in the space of just 24 months. That is Brentford in an absolute nutshell, and as always, as good as he is, they replaced him with these. Brighton and Hove Albion, Anthony Knockaert. Whilst not quite as laser-like and borderline faultless as Brentford, Brighton have also been fairly wily operators within the transfer market in recent years. I thought Yves Bissouma was a smart signing, even for a fairly hefty £15 million, and you'd have to say that seems even more obvious with the benefit of hindsight. Meanwhile, Pascal Gross was an absolute snip at just £3 million. My choice, and by a decent margin though, is Anthony Knockaert, and I'll tell you why. Seeing as though that is sort of how this video is going to go, in case you hadn't noticed. Knockaert had already played a hand in one Premier League promotion at Leicester City before joining Brighton, but he arrived on the south coast of England via Belgian Pro League side Standard Liège in January 2016 for just £3 million. He was an instant success, and in his first full season with the club, he bagged 15 goals and won the Championship Player of the Year award as the Seagulls won promotion to the Premier League. The club hasn't been relegated since, and whilst Knockaert's output reduced in the top flight, he still pocketed a more than £10 million profit for Brighton when he departed for Fulham, initially on loan and then on a permanent. Burnley, Nick Pope. If you watch a lot of my videos, you're probably bored stiff by now of me talking about Nick Pope, but needless to say, I think that he is a very good goalkeeper. He is not without competition at Turf Moor, where the most honourable of honourable mentions are owed to the likes of Michael Keane, James Tarkowski, Jack Cork and Chris Wood among others, and the Clarets turned a profit of well over £20 million on Keane alone. I still think that Pope is the pick of the bunch though, brought to Burnley by Sean Dyche in a deal worth less than £2 million from Charlton Athletic, and he has twice won Burnley's Player of the Year award since then, and deservedly made the Premier League team of the season just a couple of seasons ago. Chelsea. Not Danny Drinkwater. Lol. Yet more trademark Alfie banter. In all seriousness, Danny Drinkwater is quite possibly the worst signing any team has made over the last 7 years, let alone just Chelsea. But who has actually been the Blues' best signing? Chelsea. N'Golo Kante. It is pretty remarkable that N'Golo Kante cost Chelsea less than Danny Drinkwater, with both players arriving at Stamford Bridge from Leicester City. In fairness, if you just combined their two transfer fees and pretend that Chelsea paid £67 million for Kante and absolutely nothing for Drinkwater, then they probably would have paid around market value for the Frenchman and would only slightly have overpaid for Drinkwater. Chelsea have made a number of very good signings since the summer of 2014, including Diego Costa and Cesc Fabregas in that summer 2014 window. And I would give another honourable mention to Edouard Mendy, who has been vital to the Blues' upturn in fortunes since his arrival, and he set the club back just a little over £20 million. Kante is my man though, now in his 6th season at Stamford Bridge, and still arguably the club's main man on the big occasions, as he proved in the latter stages of the Champions League last season. Crystal Palace, WILFRIED ZAHA. It is a very straightforward one for Crystal Palace in truth, given the fact that WILFRIED ZAHA set the Eagles back between £3 to £6 million when he returned to Selhurst Park, and he has since become arguably the club's greatest player of all time. And they could comfortably have sold him for somewhere in the region of, well, let's say £50 to £60 million at some point over the last few years. The 3-time Palace Player of the Year now ranks 5th in the club's all-time appearance charts, and just outside of the top 10 of their scoring charts. And it is his spark and invention, time and time again in recent years, that has ensured Palace have remained in the Premier League. A quick mention for Vicente Guaita, who cost Palace nothing and won their Player of the Season award last season, along with more recent recruits like Eber Eze, Michael Elise and Odsonne Edouard, all of whom look like smart signings to me, but none come close to Wilf Zaha at this stage. Everton. Dominic Calvert-Lewin. A slightly trickier call than those that precede it, you could make a strong case for Romelu Lukaku at Everton, given the number of goals that he scored at Goodison Park, the £28 million that Everton paid to bring him there, and the club record £75 million, plus £15 million in potential future add-ons that it took to get him out. I'd also give a mention to Mason Holgate, who was signed for peanuts, but looks to be a real talent. Meanwhile, recent free transfers Andros Townsend and, in particular, Damari Gray, look like they could be real bargains for the club. Nonetheless, I have gone with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who cost Everton just £1.5 million when he arrived from Sheffield United at the age of only 19. And though it took just a little bit longer for him to get going than it did someone like Lukaku, he is now the Toffees' main man, and I suspect they could now sell him for a similar price to the one that they received for Lukaku. Leeds United. Pablo Hernandez. Leeds United's last 7 seasons worth of transfers is one hell of a mixed bag, meaning there are some real duds, but also no lack of gems. The likes of Liam Cooper, Chris Wood, Stuart Dallas, Luke Ayling and Patrick Bamford have all proved to be fantastic bargains. Meanwhile, more recent recruits like Ilham Melier and Rafinha have already paid dividends, and seem likely to have significant sell-on values. My choice is a man who left Ellen Road for absolutely nothing though, and that man is Pablo Hernandez. In fairness, he also cost the club nothing, and for the best part of 5 seasons, Hernandez lit up Ellen Road. The former Swansea City man was already a veteran upon his arrival in Yorkshire, but he played with a boyish charm and tremendous imagination. Whilst Marcelo Bielsa has undoubtedly been Leeds United's best signing of the past 10 years, Hernandez played a key role in changing the mood at Ellen Road, getting supporters excited about the club again, and indeed, he did play a very big part in Leeds' return to the Premier League following 16 years away. Leicester City. N'Golo Kante. I don my cap to N'Golo Kante, a player so good that he makes this list twice. It is worth noting that neither Riyad Mahrez nor Jamie Vardy were signed by Leicester within the last 7 years, just in case any of you were wondering. But that doesn't mean Leicester are at all lacking in competition. In fact, I think their business over the past 7 years is second only to Brentford's in terms of current Premier League teams. Signings like Esteban Cambiasso, Mark Albrighton, Johnny Evans, Christian Fuchs, Robert Huth, Wilfried Ndidi, Harry Maguire and Yuri Tielemans have all proved to be outstanding pieces of business, and all played a key role in establishing Leicester as the envious outfit that they have now become. Kante takes it for me though as an absolute worldie of a signing who came out of nowhere. And as with the last time, when I say nowhere, I mean France. Kante set the Foxes back just £5.6 million, and though he only spent a single season with the club, I think he was the single most important player in their unlikely Premier League title win, before departing for a measly, but still enormously profitable, £32 million. Liverpool. Mohamed Salah. Liverpool fans love a net spend statistic when locked in an argument online, and understandably so, since they have done some very smart business under the stewardship of their fairly ham-fisted American owners. There is perhaps a temptation to go with someone like Andy Robertson or James Milner, given the fact that Milner cost nothing and Robertson not much more. Or at the opposite end of the scale, Virgil van Dijk and Alisson, who both cost a fortune but seem to be the final pieces in Jurgen Klopp's Premier League and Champions League winning jigsaw. The best Liverpool signing over the last 7 years though, as far as I'm concerned, and that is my remit, is Mohamed Salah. A ballsy signing, some felt £36.5 million, with the potential to climb to £43 million, seemed like a fortune for a man who got few opportunities at Chelsea. It took barely 2 months for Salah to look like a bargain, and he has gone on merrily ever since, becoming one of the most ruthless footballers on the face of the planet. Manchester City. Kevin De Bruyne. Another transfer that faced a lot of backlash at the time due to the player involved previously having failed to break through at Chelsea, Kevin De Bruyne set Manchester City back £55 million in the summer of 2015. I distinctly remember Robbie Savage stating at the time that De Bruyne, quote, wasn't someone who you would pay to go and watch, and thinking, wow, if he can get a gig talking about football, I should be fine, as I made my first ventures into football journalism. That is perhaps a little bit harsh on Robbie Savage, but clearly he hadn't caught much of De Bruyne in the Bundesliga, where he had just made 20 assists in a single season and won the Player of the Season award playing for Wolfsburg. He has since become the best midfielder in all of world football and one of the best that the Premier League has ever seen, continuing to create goals with a remarkable consistency, and for that reason, he is the outstanding candidate at the Etihad, even with the likes of Raheem Sterling, Ilkay Gundogan, Ederson, Alexander Zinchenko, and Ferran Torres for competition. Manchester United. Bruno Fernandes. Manchester United have made some very good signings over the last 7 years, and even more really quite bad ones. It seems pretty clear to me that Bruno Fernandes is the best of the lot though, despite costing them as much as £68 million, if he manages, to trigger all of his add-ons. Fernandes seems likely to trigger all of his individual performance-related ones, at a minimum, given the fact that he has started almost every game at Old Trafford since his arrival, scoring an enormous number of goals from midfield, and providing a healthy dose of assists for good measure. Bruno's arrival at Old Trafford felt like a turning point for the club, and as I said recently on this channel, I'm not sure their impressive signings this summer would even have been possible without him. A shout out to all of those summer signings, as well as one to Luke Shaw, but Fernandes is the right choice as far as I'm concerned. Newcastle United, Ayoze Perez. This seems like a bit of a boring choice for Newcastle, and I would rather pick someone more exciting like Alan Saint-Maximin, who is a huge talent and could easily become Newcastle's best recent signing by a country mile. However, by a dry paint-by-numbers methodology, at this moment in time, I have to pick Ayoze Perez ahead of the Frenchman, whilst also giving a quick word to Jorginho Wijnaldum and Martin Dubravka. Perez cost Newcastle less than £2 million, according to most reports, enjoying 4.5 consistently decent seasons at St James's Park, followed by 6 months in which he was on fire under Rafa Benitez. That prompted a £30 million move to Leicester City, so based upon the tiny fee paid for him, his overall performance level, and the huge profit he secured Newcastle, I mean Mike Ashley I should say, he has to take it in my view. Norwich City, Teemu Pukki. This was a difficult decision in some respects, and I suspect some will disagree with my conclusion, but my gut kept saying Pukki, regardless of the perfectly valid arguments in favour of other candidates, so in the end, I went with the Finnish frontman. James Maddison, Emi Buendia, and Ben Godfrey are the most glaring honourable mentions, all sold for enormous profits, having played exceptionally well during their time spent at Carrow Road. I cannot escape the fact that Teemu Pukki didn't cost Norwich City a single penny in terms of a transfer fee though, yet he has scored 55 goals in just 84 championship games for the club, scoring the goals to fire Norwich to promotion in each of his 2 second-tier seasons with the club, in addition to being their top scorer in the Premier League as well. When one thinks of the amount of money Pukki has brought Norwich City through those promotions, it is even more than the profits made on the aforementioned trio combined. So, he gets the nod from me. Southampton, Virgil van Dijk. Much of Southampton's success over the last decade, as they climbed from League One to 6th in the Premier League at one stage, can be attributed to the Saints' superb academy system and players promoted from within their own youth ranks. The club's best signings over the last 7 years, as far as I'm concerned, have both been sold to Liverpool for significant profit. The first was Sadio Mane, brought to St Mary's from Red Bull Salzburg for £11.8 million, where he enjoyed 2 impressive campaigns before being sold onto Jurgen Klopp's side for £34 million. He is pipped to the post in terms of both performance levels and, primarily, profitability by Virgil van Dijk. Another player, like John McGinn, who clubs ought to have been queuing up to bring to England from Scotland for about twice the amount that was actually paid for him, the Dutchman set Southampton back just £13 million. In 2.5 seasons on the south coast, Van Dijk hardly put a foot wrong, before forcing through an enormous £75 million transfer to Anfield. Tottenham Hotspur, Son Heung-min. Whilst I wouldn't go so far as to call Son Heung-min the perfect footballer, primarily because there are obviously players who are better than him, he is an absolute manager's dream. Outstanding pretty much since, well, at least his second season at Tottenham, Son does whatever is asked of him, he makes the incredibly difficult look simple, and he does it all with a smile on his face, seemingly without ever causing any kind of upset or fuss. A player like that is close to being invaluable within the modern game, yet Tottenham signed Son 6 seasons ago for just £22 million from Bayer Leverkusen. Son is so good that I think his name shouldn't be too far off discussions of the best signing in the Premier League over the last decade, and he ensures that the likes of Dele Alli and Toby Alderweireld, despite being bargains for the fees involved, never stood a chance. Watford, Richarlison. In the interest of full disclosure, I made the executive decision not to consider any players who joined Watford from Udinese, on the grounds that they weren't really signed by Watford at that point, with their owners already owning the player and just switching them from one asset to another. along with the fact that they were all announced as undisclosed fees, and it is fairly challenging to find any reliable reports of what the true fees actually were. To be honest, even if I hadn't imposed that rule upon myself, Richarlison still would have been my likely selection. Brought to Watford from Fluminense shortly after turning 20 for a fee of £11.2 million, Richarlison only spent a single season at Vicarage Road, before his old boss, Marco Silva, brought him with him to Goodison Park, in a huge deal worth up to £50 million, subject to add-ons. With that in mind, Richarlison is my choice, with a quick word for Abdoulaye Doucouré, who also departed for Everton, and Joao Pedro, who cost very little and who I still think could have a bright future in the game. West Ham. Tomáš Souček. As with Leeds and with a couple of other clubs, West Ham's transfer dealings over the past 7 years have been a real mixed bag, with some absolute duds like Jordan Hugill and Enner Valencia, to bargains such as Aaron Creswell and Vladimir Coufal, along with gems like Dimitri Payet, Mikel Antonio, Jared Bowen, and Said Benrahma. If he can string together a barnstorming couple of seasons, Benrahma could join N'Golo Kante as the only man in this video to feature for 2 different clubs, but as things stand, my choice, and I think it has to be, Tomáš Souček. As with John McGinn, Souček is someone whose praises I sang on this channel before they arrived in the English game. But also like McGinn, and to an even greater extent in truth, Souček has far exceeded even my expectations. A fabulous defensive midfielder who constitutes one half of one of the best double pivots in the division, Souček is athletic, intelligent, and a real danger in the air. He cost West Ham less than £20 million, an outrageous bargain for a player of his acumen. Wolves. Ruben Neves. Ever since the beginning of their rise under Fossen International, thanks in large part to the club's close ties to Portuguese super agent Jorge Mendes, Wolves have pulled off some excellent signings. They have been contrasted with the odd flop, make no mistake, but overall the complexion looks pretty good. Portuguese trio Rui Patricio, Diogo Jota, and João Moutinho were all pivotal to the club's success in recent years. Meanwhile, club captain Conor Cody has been a constant throughout and cost the club just £2 million back in 2015, and I'm a big fan of Romain Saiss, who was also a bargain at just £3.6 million. Lastly, on the honourable mentions front, Wolves paid just £2 million when they first signed Benik Afobe from Arsenal, before flogging him for a club record £10 million to Bournemouth after he had scored 23 goals in 48 games at Molineux. All are eclipsed by the signing of Ruben Neves, despite the fact that the former Porto captain arrived in Wolverhampton for £16 million. I say despite because £16 million is an eye-watering fee for a championship team to fork out on a single player, which is what Wolves were at the time, but it's also a fraction of what Neves is really worth. He stood out a mile in England's second tier, in a Wolves side that I believe is the best that I've ever seen in the Championship, and Neves still stands out for Bruno Laga's side in the Premier League. His arrivals signal that Wolves were a club going places, and more than 4 years on, Neves remains a talismanic figure in the West Midlands. So that is it for today's video, but I hope you all enjoyed it. Hit the like button if that was the case. Thank you all very much as ever for watching. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any thoughts on the video. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for the channel. And you can also find me on social media, on Twitter or Instagram by the username at HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.